On the windswept coast of Brittany, France, an anomaly emerges from the mist, stretching for kilometers, over 3,000 massive granite blocks. But these stones don't form a mystical circle, like Stonehenge. They aren't part of a temple complex like Gobeklitepe. No, they are arranged in perfect militaristic order, in straight lines, marching toward the horizon. Like a frozen army of stone, this is Carnac. And it is the largest, densest, and most incomprehensible collection of megaliths on Earth. Why would a Neolithic people, 6,000 years ago, 2,000 years before the pyramids, expend an unimaginable, generational effort to quarry 50-ton stones and drag them into these perfect lines across the landscape? Was this a stone army? A giant astronomical calendar? Or was it part of a lost ritual we can never hope to understand? Welcome to the Shard of History. Season 2. Legacy of Giants. To understand Carnac, you must forget the idea of a single place. This is a vast ritual landscape, spread over tens of square kilometers. The region is filled with hundreds of massive megalithic tombs called dolmens, stone chambers, and giant earthen mounds called tumuli, some the size of a hill. But the most staggering features are the alignments, those giant stone rows. The most famous are clustered in three main groups: Ménec, Kermario, and Kerleskan. Let's just look at Ménec. Over 1,000 stones arranged in 11 rows, stretching for more than a kilometer. These rows are not random. They run from west to east. The stones at the western end are colossal, some 4 meters high and weighing 50 tons. As you move east, the rows narrow and the stones progressively shrink, eventually becoming just a meter tall. And at each end of these 11 rows there is, or was, a stone circle, or cromlech. This is not a coincidence. This is deliberate, highly complex design. This isn't building a monument. This is rewriting the landscape. These engineers were Neolithic farmers who lived between 4,500 and 3,300 BCE. This is thousands of years before Stonehenge's Great Sarsen Circle, and 2,000 years before the Great Pyramids of Giza. So, how did they do it? They had no metal tools, only harder quartzite stones, wooden levers, and antler picks. To split the granite, they likely used fire setting, lighting massive fires on the rock, then dousing it with cold water to crack it, and then they moved it. Our best guess, on massive wooden sledges, perhaps rolled over logs pulled by hundreds of people with hide ropes. This might not seem as complex as Egyptian or Olmec engineering, but in terms of social organization, it is a masterpiece. Think about it. In Egypt, a pharaoh existed. He said build, and it was built. But the society here was likely more tribal. This wasn't one king's project. This was a communal effort, probably spanning centuries. Grandparents started it. Grandchildren continued it. What motivated thousands of people for that long to stick to a single geometric plan? It requires a powerful faith or a powerful authority, but the how pales in comparison to the why. Why lines? Why thousands of them? The theories are as fascinating as they are confusing. Theory 1. The astronomical observatory, the most popular. Since the 18th century, researchers noticed these lines weren't random. According to many, especially the Scottish engineer Alexander Thom, Carnac was a giant astronomical calculator. The stone rows, he argued, were aligned to specific points on the horizon, the rising and setting of the sun and moon at the solstices and equinoxes. More than that, Thom claimed these people even understood the complex 18.6-year cycle of the moon, the lunar standstill, and used these massive lines as sighting lines to predict eclipses. In this theory, the Neolithic farmers used this giant stone calendar to know when to plant their crops and when to hold their festivals. But here's the problem. With over 3,000 stones, you can find an alignment for almost any celestial body. Is this proof, or is it just modern man projecting his own obsession with order onto the past? Theory 2. The ritual and ceremonial path. The path to the ancestors. This theory suggests the lines themselves were not the destination. They were the path. The Carnac region isn't just lines, it's filled with those dolmen tombs. Perhaps these thousands of stones formed a monumental, processional avenue, kilometers long, leading to these sacred tombs or circles. People would walk slowly between these stone rows, perhaps to honor their dead or for seasonal rituals. The shrinking of the stones from west, large, to east, small. Could this symbolize a journey, perhaps from life to death or from a beginning to an end? This wasn't a temple you sat in, this was a ritual you experienced. Theory 3. Social and political borders, a show of power. This is a more practical theory. What if the stones had no mystical meaning at all? In Neolithic Europe, farming was spreading, populations were growing, and land was becoming more valuable. Perhaps these massive stone rows were simply a tribe or a clan's way of saying, "This is ours." A show of force against neighboring tribes, a giant fence marking their territory. It was a kind of Neolithic potlatch. A statement. We are a community so rich, so organized, and so powerful that we can afford to waste this much effort, moving 50-ton stones just to prove our status. Do not mess with us. This is a very human and very powerful interpretation. Theory 4. The local legend, the Stone Army. And then, of course, there are the local myths. A Christian-era myth says the stones were pagan Roman soldiers, turned to stone by a saint, or sometimes Merlin, as they fled towards the sea. This is a legend, obviously, but could there be a kernel of truth buried inside? What if the stones really do represent an army? Not Roman soldiers, but perhaps the spirits of the ancestors. A stone army, standing in eternal vigil, protecting the land, guarding the massive tombs of the dead. Theory 5. The seismic detector, the most radical. This is the most modern and speculative theory. Some engineers have noted that Carnac is situated on one of the world's most active fault lines. They've proposed that the precise and sometimes non-touching placement of these stones might have served as a primitive earthquake warning system, or seismic damper. The idea is that an impending tremor would create a domino effect or a sound wave through the massive stones. This is far from proven, but we know Neolithic people observed the natural world in ways we have forgotten. So, which theory is correct? The truth is, we don't know, and perhaps we never will. The people who built these monuments left us no written records. Their belief systems, their language, their worldview is completely lost. Maybe the answer is all of them. A calendar, a temple path, and a stone army. Or maybe the final stone was never the point. Perhaps the point was the process of pulling the stone together. Perhaps this massive generational project was the ritual itself, the very thing that bound thousands of people to a common purpose, a shared task that held their society together. Carnac shows us that the megalithic idea has no single answer. Gobeklitepe was a temple, a place to enter and gather inside. Carnac was a landscape, a place designed to be moved through, to be experienced. One was a building, the other was a landscape. But both were parta of that deep human echo, the desire to leave a permanent, massive mark on the world. The lines of Carnac have been waiting silently for thousands of years. But our next stop is Ireland. There, the stones weren't just aligned, they were assembled with such precision that they built a machine designed to capture the light, subscribe to the shard of history. In the next episode, we enter the dark passage of Newgrange and the 5,000-year-old secret of the winter solstice.